and Senator Tulfo. Alam niyo po, talagang nakakalungkot, nakakagalit, nakakapanginig ng laman. Ilang ulit pa ba sa Kuwait na naman? Ilang buhay pa ang walang saysay na masasayang?
Isang insidente na itong isang amo ng rape ng OFW. Ito po ang nakakainit ng ulo at napamura po ako noon nung ako po'y nasa radyo.
Nadurog po ang aking puso, ang ating mga puso, nang makita ko sa balita ang kalunos-lunos na sinapit ni Ginang Ranara. Nakikiusap, kumakatok sa pintuan ng ating mga kababayan para bigyan pong diin na ang sinapit ng ating bayaning OFW ay hindi po kailanman gawain ng isang Muslim. Hindi po ito parte ng aming pananampalataya. Ito po ay tahasang paglabag sa katuruan ng Islam.
What's up mga tol, mga senador at buong senado? Hindi maiwasang maglabas ng sama ng loob at ilabas ang galit sa bansang Kuwait nang karumal-dumal na pinatay nga ang ating isang kababayang si Jullibee Narana sa anak ng kanyang employer na tinapon nga lang ito sa disyerto at sinunog. Sa isang panayam kasi ng senador na si Jinggoy Estrada ay dito na nga inopen niya at pa sa panayam ni Senator Jinggoy Estrada na kung saan nga dito napag-usapan ang nangyaring ito sa bansang Kuwait na kung saan nga dito ay naglabas ng sama ng loob at galit at hindi nga rin maiwasang maging emosyonal ang halos lahat ng mga senador dahil nga sa paulit-ulit na pangyayaring ito na tila hindi nga nadadala ang bansang Kuwait sa pagmamaltrato sa ating mga kababayang OFW na kung saan ay nagpakahirap magtrabaho at mapagsilbihan ang mga employer nito sa bansang Kuwait, pero tila hindi nga pinapahalagahan ng bansang Kuwait ang pagsisilbi ng ating mga kababayang nagpapakahirap sa bansa nila. At narito nga ang mainit at emosyonal na kanilang naging panayam at komento at lalong ikinagagalit ng halos lahat ng mga senador. Panoorin ang video. So hanggang dito lang tayo mga tol. Maraming salamat sa panunood at patuloy na suporta. God bless you sa inyo lahat. Hanggang sa muli. Paalam.
Rafi Tulfo. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Good afternoon, Madam President and my dear colleagues. As the chairman of the Committee on Migrant Workers, I would like to associate myself with the speech of our Vice Chair, Senator Jinggoy Estrada. The death of another one of our heroes should never be taken lightly. One life lost is one too many. Kung maaari pong mangyari ito sa isang katulad ni Jullibee Narana, hindi malayo na mangyari rin ito sa iba pang kababayan natin sa Kuwait. Kailangan natin may sigurado na ang iba pa nating mga OFW ay protektado. Itong 2022, may 69,145 na new hires at 31,078 na rehires sa Kuwait. A total of 100,223 ang nasa Kuwait. We owe these more than 100,000 overseas Filipino workers the protection that we promised them when we allowed them to go abroad for the sake of their families. Noong mga nakaraang taon, naitigil po ang pagpapadala natin sa Kuwait dahil sa mga insidenteng katulad na nangyari kay Jullibee. Noong 2018, sa Kuwait din, may namatay na Filipino domestic helper na si Joanna Dimafilis na natagpuang patay sa isang freezer. At noong 2019, si Jeneline Villabende naman ay na-rape at namatay din sa Kuwait. Na-lift ang ban dahil nangako na ayusin ng gobyerno ng Kuwait ang kondisyon ng ating mga OFWs sa kanilang bansa. Ngayon, ito na namang karumal-dumal na pangyaring ang sinapit ng isa nating kababayan. Kailangan natin pag-aralan kung ano ang sitwasyon na kinaharap ng mga kababayan natin na nadideploy sa Kuwait. Ligtas pa ba sila doon? May suporta ba ang gobyerno ng Kuwait sa ating mga kababayan na pupunta roon? Sa kaso ni Jullibee, mabuti na lang at naaresto na agad ang salarin na anak ng kanyang employer. Pero sana hindi na nangyari ito kung nasasala lang na mabuti ang mga potential employers ng ating mga OFWs. Matagal ko na pong sinusulong na dapat may katumbas na security requirements sa mga nais maging employer ng mga OFWs. Hindi yung mga OFWs lang pinagsusumiti ng napakaraming requirements bago mapapunta sa abroad. Kung sila ay naninigurado na ligtas sila sa mga kuha nilang OFW, dapat tayo din manigurado na ligtas ang mga kababayan natin. Ikukonsulta ko po ito sa DMW at OWA para matigil ang ganitong mga pangyari. Ganun pa man, I commend the efforts of the DMW and OWA in their support and immediate action regarding the case of Jullibee and for the needs of her family. I have been informed that they will be given by OWA a guaranteed financial aid of 220,000 pesos and an additional 800,000 pesos from life insurance provided by agency. Kanina po, nakausap ko ang mother ni Jullibee at nagkukentuhan po kami at nakwento niya po sa akin ang mga pangyari. At ako po, on the spot naawa, kanina rin po, nagpatid po ako ng personal kong pera na 50,000 pesos sa isa kong staff para tulong sa kanya. While these amounts will never replace the life of Jullibee, it will alleviate any worry that they may have financially. And we hope that the DMW and OWA continue to give this kind of service for all our OWAs or OFWs. And as the chairman of the Committee on Migrant Workers, I will not stop at being the representative here in the Senate. I will fight for what they deserve as the modern-day heroes of our country and their families for whom they risk their lives by venturing into foreign lands just to provide for them. Again, I thank Senator Jinggoy Estrada for bringing this matter to the attention before this body. And before I end my speech, meron lang po akong mga gustong karagdagan. Tama nga po si Senator Jinggoy na kailangan talaga masusing monitoring needed because right now, as I see it, kulang po talaga ang tinatawag na monitoring para masiguro na safe ang ating mga OFWs. Ang isa pong matagal ko na pong iminimungkahi sa mga kinukulan ngayon sa ating DMW ay yung bakit kapag ang ating OFW pumunta ng abroad, kinakailangan nila ng police clearance, barangay clearance, NBI clearance, napakaraming clearance. Parang kinailangan nilang dumaan sa butas ng karayom bago sila ma-deploy para masiguro na yung ating mga OFW ay walang record, hindi masamang tao pagdating doon sa Saudi. Pero bakit ito mga employer, wala man lang silang isinusumiti na kahit na anong record na magpapatunay na sila ay malinis, na ma-okay ang kanilang pagkatao para masiguro na safe ang ating mga OFWs. Lumilitaw, marami sa mga employers ay may mga criminal records, mga dating rapists, mga dating kriminal, dating mga mandoloko, loko-loko, at hindi po na-screen. Yan po ang isa sa mga bagay na sinisiguro ko po na matutugunan na ng ating DMW to make sure kung ating mga OFWs ay well-screened bago pumunta ng abroad. Dapat din ang mga employers na tatanggap sa kanila, sila din po ay well-screened to make sure na maganda ang kanilang record at hindi mapapahamak ang ating mga OFWs na tatanggap sa kanila roon. Isa pa po, tama po si Senator Jinggoy, ay monitoring. Yan din po ang aking sinasuggest noon pa. Kulang po sa monitoring. Palagay ko po may pagkukulang dito ang ating mga otoridad. I'm very sure, bago maganap ang rape dito kay Jullibee, meron na pong mga ginagawang hindi magaganda itong kanyang amo. And I'm sure siya po ay nakapagsumbong because hindi naman po agad-agad ra-rapin po ng isang amo doon ang ating OFW right there and then. Meron po tinatawag na pagnanasa. Meron po tinatawag na pag-attempt. And doon pa lamang ang ating OFW for sure, yan po yung nagsumbong sa ating mga kinaukulan, sa agency, sa FRA, or recruitment agency, o dili kaya nagsumbong sa polo. Pero ano ang ginagawang aksyon? Usually, sa akin po karanasan, A, sasabihin po ng mga recruitment agency, magtyaga-tyaga ka lang muna. B, parating ng replacement mo. And then C, tatakbong OFW sa polo. Pagdating sa polo, kadalasan, walang sumasagot sa telepono. At kapag meron man, tatamad-tamad. Another thing, Madam President, na na-notice ko nung last hearing namin, consultative meeting, akin pong napansin na ayon po doon sa DMW at sa mga nakausap ko doon sa consolidated meeting, 100 OFWs ang ni-recruit ng isang pangkaraniwang agency papuntang abroad. Just imagine, 100 OFWs a month para ang isang recruitment agency ay matatawag na isang agency karapat-dapat na magpadala ng mga workers sa abroad. Just imagine, 100 OFWs kada buwan. Sa isang taon, that is 1,200 OFWs. 1,200 OFWs sa isang taon. Now, ang tanong, ilan ang mga tauhan ng mga recruitment agencies dito at yung sumasalo doon sa abroad na FRA? Kadalasan, 2, 3. Paano sagutin ang telepono pag tumawag ang 1,200 halimbawa sabay-sabay dahil nagka-problema, 3 lamang po ang mga tao na sumasagot sa telepono? Those problems I have already addressed and I've already talked to the DMWs. Even while we speak, yan po ay kanilang pinag-aaralan kung paano ma-resolve ang ganong klaseng problema. I am not going to ask questions, but all I can say is I support fully ito pong privilege speech ni Senator Jingoy Estrada, and I will work hand in hand with him and with the DMW para maprotektahan po ang kapakanan ng ating tinatawag na modern day heroes, ang ating mga OFWs. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Senator Tulfo. Madam President, if I may just add.
Senator Estrada.
Thank you, Madam President. Kung pwede lang po akong magdagdag ng karagdagang impormasyon tungkol dun kung paano ni-recruit itong si Jullibee Narana. Okay. Jullibee applied with PRA Catalyst International Manpower Services. Ito yung local recruitment agency dito sa atin as a domestic worker in Kuwait. Her Kuwait recruitment agency was Platinum International Office for Recruitment of Domestic Manpower. And her direct employer was Owayed Johaish Methey Alazmi. Jullibee completed the processing of her documents on June 28, 2022 and arrived in Kuwait on July 12, 2022, a few weeks after. Okay, ito yung masakit. Based on the case management system, Catalyst, yung kanyang local recruitment agency, has 12 recruitment violation cases with 7 cases still pending before the Education Bureau of the Department of Migrant Workers. But number 3, both Platinum International Office for Recruitment of Domestic Manpower, yung kanilang FRA, and the employer and the direct employer have no record of having been charged with a disciplinary action case. Ang sinasabi ko lang po dito, mahal na Pangulo, ay itong local recruitment agency na nag-recruit kay Jullibee ay merong pending na 12 kaso before the Adjudication Bureau of the DMW. Dapat ito, dapat ito, kino-close shop na ito, hindi sinasara na ito at hindi na maaring mag-operate. Dahil hanggat may pending case ka pa, ibig sabihin na marami kang ginagawang violation. If I am correct, Madam President.
Tama yan.
I think to my dear colleague Senator Tulfo, if this privileged speech of mine will be referred to your committee, I think we have to summon the owner of this local recruitment agency to shed light on how they recruited Jullibee Narana.
Yeah, if I may go back to what I said earlier, Madam President, dapat talaga meron screening, matinding screening ang gagawin ng ating mga recruitment agency dito, maging doon sa abroad, yung sa foreign recruitment agency, screening doon sa magiging employer ng ating OFW. Kasi again, I repeat, for the end time, bago makapunta ng abroad ang ating OFW, ang worker doon, katakot-takot na screening, magpapakita ng mga kung ano-anong dokumento, come up with so many requirements to ensure na malinis siya, wala siyang record, at maging safe ang kanyang employer when she arrives there. On the other hand, walang pinapakita na anumang klaseng dokumento o patunay ang employer na siya ay harmless na siya ay okay na maging amo. Matter of fact, meron pa akong isang insidente na itong isang amo ng rape ng OFW, nagmalupit at ng rape, umalis yung OFW at hanggang sa makauwi ng Pilipinas, minarapat na hindi na magsampa ng kaso. Ito po ang nakakainit ng ulo at napamura po ako noon nung ako po'y nasa radyo sapagkat after na matanggal yung ating OFW doon, makataka sa impyerno, nagpadala ang the same recruitment agency ng another OFW sa same employer. And for the second time, nabulesya na naman yung pangalong OFW. Kaya ako po'y napamura. Kita niyo yan.
I hope this is not the same recruitment agency.
Hindi naman.
Senator Tulfo.
Pero I'd like to make it clear, Madam President, na hindi naman lahat ng mga agency ay loko-loko. Pero marami sa kanila. Kaya nga nung last consultative meeting, sinabi ko po na it's about time sarain ang mga FRA at mga recruitment agency dahil marami sa kanila yung mga hausyaw. Marami sa kanila yung walang kakayahan na magpatakbo ng recruitment agency. Marami sa kanila yung mga dami. Wala silang kapital, wala silang pera. Para kung sakaling kailangan ng OFW ng tulong, kailangan makauwi, wala silang pambigay ng pamasahe para makibalik na ating OFW. Kaya natitenga doon sa shelter natin. So, it's about time na sinabi ko po sa DMW sa last consultative meeting namin a few days ago na kailangan sarain itong mga FRA at itong mga recruitment agency. And I'll see to it as the chairman, committee chairman ng migrant workers na maisaayos itong ganitong klaseng problema at mailagay sa tweet. Ito pa nga po, Secretary Ople met with the parents of Jullibee on January 23. The parents told Secretary that they were able to talk to Jullibee on January 20, Friday. Jullibee complained of experiencing cruelty from the 17-year-old son of the employer and even recounted an incident where she was threatened with an ice pick. So, tama po ako. Noong nag-attempt pa lamang po itong perpetrator, nagsumbong na po si Jullibee sa magulang. Ang magulang po, nagsumbong sa recruitment agency rito. Meron na po silang pinuntahan. However, yung napagsumbungan, hindi po kumilos. Dahil kung kumilos lamang po sana yung mga napagsumbungan ng recruitment agency, hindi po sana nangyari ito dahil agad-agad pinull out na si Jullibee at dinala sa shelter. Unfortunately, Madam President, kung nagsumbong lang sana sa akin tanggapan ito, I would assure you, buhay pa sana si Jullibee. Dahil ang dami ko na pong kasong ganito na pagsumbong sa akin, in less than 24 hours, napupulot po yung OFW at nadadala sa shelter, and then after a few days or weeks, na ipababalik sa bansa. It is very unfortunate na hindi po natawagan na aking opisina. But anyway, tapos na po ito. And magtulungan tayong lahat dito, Senator Jinggoy, na this will never happen ever again.
May we know, Senator Tulfo or Senator Estrada, if there is a hotline, a cell number like a 911 that any domestic helper deployed overseas may call so that instant action within the same hour if they can be rescued?
I think you have to, excuse me,
Yes.
if I may be recognized. I think they have to contact their respective polo offices, their respective countries, the host country, rather.
That's a long process.
There is no direct line. I don't think there is any direct line.
Would you suggest?
Our
Meron, sorry.
OFWs. Meron?
Madam President, meron po. Ito yung OWA hotline 1348.
Here, based here.
Pero
Yeah.
wherever, kahit saan silang bansa, idadial lang nila +63 and then 2 and then 1348. It goes directly to DMW, and then the DMW sila na mismong tatawag sa mga kinukulang kung saan bansa ka man.
I hope that works. And
I hope so. Kaya nga, subukan nga natin. Can we?
I hope,
kay Tulfo lang,
I hope
sir.
that works, and I hope that that number can be disseminated to all, at least, maybe never mind the professionals, they would know what to do, but at least for domestic helpers in dire need for instant action.
Makailang beses na po namin yan, disseminate yung information na po yan sa aking programa at maging po dun sa previous hearing, yan po ay naibanggit na. But anyway, pwede pong banggitin ito paulit-ulit. Ngayon, tinatawagan natin. Sige, tingnan ko nga kung nag-ring.
Maghintay lamang ng konting sandali at manatili sa linya.
Hello.
Konting paalala, sa pagtawag sa OWA ay Impormasyon na gagamitin lamang upang matugunan ang inyong pangailangan sa OWA. Para sa programa at serbisyo ng OWA, press 1.
That's a call center.
It's a call
Yeah,
center.
it's a call center.
Yeah, I think that has to be improved. Buti na lang tinawagan ko po ngayon. And I will talk to Secretary Tutsople para lagay ng bagong hotline na
Siguro-
sasagot agad. Right there and then, 24/7 kung kinakailangan.
If I may add, siguro before the OFW leaves our country, meron orientation or briefing na ginagawa ang DOLE
Meron.
before. Now, I think it's the
Yes.
Department of Migrant Workers. I think
Yes.
ino-orient sila, binibrief sila, at binibigay din yung hotline number just in case na may mangyari na hindi maganda dun sa ating mga kababayang OFW.
Pero the problem, Madam President, may mga binibigyan hotline tulad nga nito, hirap makontak. Kaya lang, yung hotline na tinatawagan, walang sumasagot. Tumatawag sila sa recruitment agency, sabi ko nga, 1,200 halimbawa, pinaka-minimum yan, na number of workers deployed ng nasabing recruitment agency, and they only have 3 people answering the phone. At may oras pa. And then pag pumunta po sila sa OWA, sa Polo, sa Embahada, wala po. Walang sumasagot. Kuminsan, pupunta doon yung OFW. Pag maganda-ganda ka pa, imbis na tutulungan ka, liligawan ka pa. Pero hindi na po nangyayari ngayon sa bagong administrasyon. And I commend Secretary Tutsople and of course Arnel Ignacio, yung admin ng OWA. They've been going around from one country to another sa Saudi especially para to ensure na talaga maayos yung kalagayan natin mga OFW. And I commend those people. Also, Yusek Kakdak. I've worked with him for so many years. Nung siya po ay nasa POA and OWA too. So we have 3 people who works hard. I would say workaholic people in government. Si Tutsople, si Yusek Akdak, and Arnel Ignacio. And I hope they'll keep doing what they're doing. Because for me, they're doing a heck of a good job. But anyway, before I end, ito medyo off topic ng konti. Bago ako umupo. Para sa kabatiran ng lahat, magkaibigan kami ni beautiful Senator, intelligent Senator Loren Legarda. Kasi may kumakalat sa internet na parang pinag-aaway kami, na parang magkagalit do kami ni Senator Loren Legarda. May mga clickbait doon. May mga picture na parang nag-aaway kami. Pero hindi totoo po yan. As a matter of fact, Senator Loren, mataas po masyadong respeto ko sa kanya. Mahal ko po sa Senator Loren. And siyang
Ano po yun? Ano po yun? Mahal niyo si Senator Loren?
mahal ko siya bilang isang
Okay.
colleague. Pag mo naman
Mahal ko rin po si Kong Jocelyn Tulfo.
Oh, di ba?
Opo.
Hindi.
Si Senator Tulfo, hindi niya mamahal?
Mahal ko at matalik na kaibigan.
Exactly. Yun yun. So para maliwanag lang, kasi maraming kumakalat sa social media, nakikita ko, pag tinitingnan ko parang nag-aaway kami ni Sen. Loren, hindi naman totoo. Clickbait lang. Pag pinupunta mo doon sa loob, hindi naman. Ang inaaway ko noon last time ay yung DOLE. Yun. Pero
Tama
hindi kami
po kayo.
nag-aaway ni Senator Loren.
I'm glad that just so that it's clarified, because it's not just this representation. Meron pong mga katanungan, hindi lang si Senator Tulfo, ang iba-ibang senador po sa mga ahensya ng gobyerno. Para po maintindihan ng lahat na hindi po nasa Senado, bawal po diretsyong sumagot ang mga ahensya ng gobyerno, kaya po may chair at vice chair po ng mga komite. Kaya po sila ang sumasagot po yung chairman ng finance o mga vice chair. And I say this not for the colleagues in the Senate, but for those in this live stream, para po maintindihan ng taong bayan na nanonood po ng mga finance hearing noon. Pag pinapagtagol po ni Senator Angara bilang chairman ng finance ang mga ahensya ng gobyerno or ng higit sa 100 vice chair ng finance ang agency ng government sa kanilang budget, hindi po ibig sabihin na sila isang ayon sa lahat ng panahon sa mga ginagawa o hindi po ginagawa ng ahensya ng gobyerno, pero mandato po ng mga vice chair at ng chair ipaliwanag po ang budget. At yun po ang ibig sabihin ni Senator Tulfo. Siya po ay nagtatanong sa NLRC, National Labor Relations Commission under the DOLE, at tayo po ang nagtatanggol ng DOLE budget. So thank you for that clarification. I'm a bit surprised that you mentioned it today because it was something we were discussing earlier before session start. But thank you for that clarification, Senator Tulfo.
At isa pa pala, Madam President, magsasalita akong tapos, hindi ako tatanggap ng posisyon bilang Vice Chair ng Finance. Kasi nga po, Ang kinakatakutan ko, pag ako naging Vice Chair Finance at pinadepensa sa akin ng isang agency na binabatikos ko, ano na mukha ko doon? Binabatikos ko dati and then later on, kakampihan ko na at i-depensa ko. Kaya hindi po ako pwede maging Vice Chair ng Finance dahil ayaw ko pong maisubo, akin po i-depensa ang isang ahensya na halos karamihan sa mga ahensya ay binabatikos ko and then later on ay aking pagtatanggol. Kaya yung pagiging Vice Chair, walang-wala na pong mangyari. Hindi po mapupunta sa akin yun. Maraming salamat po, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Tulfo. Based on the list given to me, Senator Revilla is supposed to interpolate, and then Senator Padilla, and I see the hand raised, our Deputy Minority Leader, Senator Risa Ontiveros, and I know that the Majority Leader will interpolate as well. And so we recognize Senator Ramon Revilla.
Junior. Thank you, Mr. President. With a heavy heart, allow me to share with the sorrow and exasperation of my good friend Senator Jinggoy and Senator Tulfo. Alam niyo po, talagang nakakalungkot, nakakagalit, nakakapanginig ng laman. Ilang ulit pa ba sa Kuwait na naman? Ilang buhay pa ang walang saysay na masasayang? Every life so mercilessly and violently taken is one life too many. We condemn this in the strongest terms. Bagong bayani. Ganyan nating tawagin ang mga kababayan nating nagkakandakuba na sa pagtatrabaho ng maayos at marangal sa dayuhang bayan habang malayo sa kanilang mga mahal sa buhay. Pero sa lupit at karahasan sa mismong mga kamay ng mga kanilang pinagsisilbihan, nang maayos pa sila ay nakakaranas ng matinding pang-aabuso. Si Jullibee Narana ay isa na namang buhay na nasayang. Pinatay, sinunog at tinapon sa disyerto na parang hayop. Maging sa kamatayan ay hindi binigyan ng dignidad. We do not tolerate this. We assure our countrymen that we will always stand as their protectors. Let this be a warning loud and clear, mga kababayan. May kasangga ang ating mga mahal na mga OFWs dito sa Senado. Hindi natin palalagpasin ang mga ganitong mga pangyayari. Managot ang dapat managot. Kaya siguro, Mr. President, one of these days, dalawin natin ang ating mga kababayan sa bawat lugar na yan at makausap talaga kung ano talaga mga kailangan pa nilang suporta na manggagaling sa atin. Again, sa inyo pong lahat, Mr. President, thank you very much po.
Maraming salamat sa aking kaibigan, aking kaposa sa kanyang sinabi. There is a nice suggestion coming from Senator Revilla that we tour or we inspect the polo offices in Saudi Arabia or in Kuwait or Qatar or even the United Arab Emirates to see para makita po ang kalagayan ng ating mga kababayang OFWs. I have been there several times, especially in the United Arab Emirates and also in Kuwait and in Qatar. I visited the polo offices in their respective embassies and I've saw within my two eyes. I have seen the condition of all our distressed overseas Filipino workers. Karamihan po kababaihan. And in fact, marami hong umiiyak, lalo na po sa Kuwait, saka sa Qatar, no, ako po ay pumunta ron, na nais po nilang umuwi sa ating bansa para makapiling nila ang kanilang pamilya sapagkat marami po ron ay inabuso, minaltrato ng kanilang amo, binuntis ng kanilang amo. Ako naman po bilang tagapangulo ng Committee on Labor nung araw, nung ako po ay nasa Senado pa, ay naawa at sinama ko po ang siguro humigit kumulang na 20 distressed OFWs mula sa United Arab Emirates papunta dito sa ating bansa without any expense coming from our government. Yun lang po. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Senator Estrada. Next to interpolate is Senator Robin Padilla. Thank you.
Maraming salamat po, Ginang Pangulo. A'udhu billahi minasyaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Bismillahi wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillahi. Mga mahal at ginagalang ko pong mga kasamahan dito sa Senado, ako po ay tumitindig sa pulpito na ito, kaisa ng ating mga kapwa Pilipino sa loob at labas ng bansa, upang ipaabot ang aking pakikipagdalamhati at pakikiramay sa ating nasawing kababayang OFW sa gitnang silangan. Nadurog po ang aking puso, ang ating mga puso, nang makita ko sa balita ang kalunos-lunos na sinapit ni Ginang Ranara. Walang buhay, puro latay, at sunog ang katawan na natagpuan sa isang disyerto sa bansang Kuwait. Mariin po natin kinukundina ang kriminalidad na ito. At kasama ni Senator Jinggoy Estrada, Senator Ramon Revilla Jr., Senator Rafi Tulfo, Senator Villanueva, ay nananawagan po ako sa lahat ng kaugnay ng ahensya sa gobyerno sa pamumuno ng Department of Migrant Workers na patuloy na kumilos para mapanagot ang may sala. Hindi po matatawaran ng anumang simpatya at pakikipagluksa ang pasakit na dinaranas ng pamilya ni Ginang Ranara. Ang ating nais pong ipaabot kasama ng ating pagdamay sa kanila ay ang pagsusog sa nararapat at mabilis na pagdamit ng hustisya para kay Ginang Ranara. At kasabay po nito ang pagtiyak na wala ng sinuman sa higit 150,000 kababayan nating household domestic workers sa Kuwait ang mauuwi sa kalunos-lunos na sinapit ni Ginang Ranara. Ginang Tagapangulo, naniniwala po tayo na walang buhay ang nararapat makaranas ng kalapastanganan sa kamay ni numan. Hindi si Ginang Ranara, hindi si numan. Kung kaya po tayo ay nananawagan sa bukas na pakikipagtulungan ng otoridad at opisyal ng Kuwait para sa mabilis na pagresolba ng kasong ito. Ako po ay lumalapit, nakikiusap, kumakatok sa pintuan ng ating mga kababayan para bigyan pong diin na ang sinapit ng ating bayaning OFW ay hindi po kailanman gawain ng isang Muslim. Hindi po ito parte ng aming pananampalataya. Ito po ay tahasang paglabag sa katuruan ng Islam. Nililinaw ko po ito sapagkat karamihan po ng nasa Kuwait ay kaisa po namin sa pananampalataya. Kasabay ng ating pakikiisa sa pagluluksa at pagsigaw ng hustisya para kay Ginang Ranara ay isa ring panawagan na naway hindi po matanim sa isip ng bawat isa na anumang uri ng karahasan ay bahagi po ng Islam. Lalo't higit na hindi po ito kailanman kasama sa doktrina ng Islam. Ang katunayan po, ang pagtitil po ng buhay sa Islam ay mahigpit pong pinagbabawal. Ang sinasabi po sa banal na Quran, ang pagpatay sa sinumang inosenteng tao ay katumbas ng pagtitil sa sangbuong sangkatauhan. Sa puntong ito, nais ko pong ipahayag ang aking intensyon upang maging bahagi ng pribilehiyong talumpati ng aking mahal at ginagalang at sinasaladuhang Ginoo mula sa San Juan, Senador Jinggoy Estrada. Muli po, ang aking pong buong pusong pakikiramay, pakikiisa sa pagkilos tungo sa hustisya para kay Ginang Ranara. Maraming salamat po, Ginang Tagapangulo.
Maraming salamat po sa aking kasamahan sa industriya ng pelikulang Pilipino, si Senator Revilla at si Senator Padilla sa inyong magandang panalita ukol sa aking privilege speech. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Senator Robin Padilla. We recognize Senator Risa Ontiveros.
Salamat po, Madam President. Hindi po ito interpellation. Nais ko pong mag-manifest ng suporta para sa privileged speech ng good gentleman mula sa San Juan. Taos-puso po akong nakikiramay sa mga naulila ng ating kababayang si Jullibee Narana. Lalo na po yung nakita natin kanina sa photo na ipinakita ng good gentleman mula sa San Juan na ang ina at isa sa 4 na anak ni Jullibee. At patuloy nating kinukundena ang mga insidenteng ito ng pang-aabuso at pagpatay pa sa ating mga kababayang nakikipagsapalaran sa Middle East. Nananawagan din ako sa Department of Migrant Workers at sa iba pang mga ahensya ng gobyerno na tutukang mabuti ang kalagayan ng ating mga kababayan sa Kuwait habang sila'y nagtatrabaho pa doon, at lalo na kung, at wag na sana pong madagdagan, may sinapit na ganitong, sabi nga po ng good gentleman mula sa San Juan, napakapait na kapalaran. Sa Kuwait po, kung saan marami na palang naiulat na kaso ng pang-aabuso at pang-mamaltrato. Inuulit ko rin po, Madam President, good gentleman mula sa San Juan, ang ating consistent na panawagan sa pagtaguyod ng mga prinsipyo ng ILO Fair Recruitment Guidelines. Specifically po, Madam Chair, good gentleman mula sa San Juan, yung relevant po doon sa binanggit kong ILO Fair Recruitment Guidelines ay yung pong patungkol sa responsibilidad ng gobyerno. Binibigyang diin ko rin po, Madam President at good gentleman mula sa San Juan, na hindi sapat ang paghingi natin ng hustisya para kay Jullibee. Ang tunay na hustisya ay kakabit ng ating masigasig na pagsiguro na mapoprotektahan ang ating mga kababayang nagtatrabaho malayo sa ating inang bayan. At ang pinakamahalaga sigurong magagawa natin para sa ating mga OFW ay ang pagsiguro natin na maging maayos ang ating ekonomiya upang wala nang mangibang bansa para lamang mabuhay ang kanilang pamilya. At huling punto po, Madam President, good gentleman mula sa San Juan, dahil nabanggit ko na rin po ang ILO kanina, kaugnay ng fair recruitment policies nito, at nabanggit din po ng good gentleman mula sa San Juan ang ILO Domestic Workers Convention number 189. Batid po natin, Madam President, good gentleman mula sa San Juan, na bukas lamang ay idadaos ang ILO High Level Mission Legislators Meeting. Kung hindi po ako nagkakamali, sa pamumuno mismo ng ating Senate President. At hari nawa, mapag-usapan po dyan sa High Level Legislators Meeting ng International Labor Organization itong iba't ibang mahalagang issue ni-raise po ng good gentleman mula sa San Juan, partikular po sa pang-aabuso at pagpatay kay Jullibee Narana at yung iba pa pong nakakabit na mga issue sa usapin ng karapatan at kagalingan ng ating mga OFWs. Salamat po, Madam President, Mr. President, at mabuhay good gentleman mula sa San Juan.
Maraming salamat sa aking kaibigan, ang Deputy Minority Floor Leader. At ako po ay sumasang-ayon sa lahat po ng sinabi ng ating Deputy Minority Floor Leader. Maraming salamat po.
Mr. President,
Yes, Majority
if I may be recognized and ask some questions, Mr. President, if I may, with the permission of our distinguished colleague, Senator Estrada.
The Majority Leader is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the onset, may I put on record my sincerest thanks and gratitude to our dear colleague, the chairperson of the Committee on Labor, which I used to chair, Mr. President, for the past 6 years. Let me also take this opportunity once again to condemn strongly the brutal killing of the 35-year-old kababayan natin, si Jullibee, isang domestic worker in Kuwait na umalis ng bansa natin para lamang magbigay ng magandang kinabukasan, masuportahan ang kanyang mga mahal sa buhay, lalo na yung kanyang 4 na minor na anak when she left the country for work. Ngunit hindi lang kayamanan ang nanakaw sa kanya, hindi lamang dignidad, kung hindi mismong buhay, Ginoong Pangulo, ang nanakaw sa kanya in a most horrific way, Mr. President. Mr. President, we can no longer claim what happened to Jullibee was an isolated case. I'm sorry to say that, but this is not an isolated case. In 2018, Mr. President, the body of Joanna Demafilis was found stuffed in a freezer. Again, in Kuwait, Mr. President. Chinap-chap po yung katawan niya. Nakita natin yung kababayan natin nasa freezer. In 2019, si Constancia Lago Dayag died in a hospital in Kuwait after being beaten and sexually abused by her employer. Si Dayag po, Ginoong Pangulo, yung kababayan natin nakitaan ng cucumber sa kanyang genitals, Mr. President. Again, in Kuwait. In the same year, Mr. President, Jeneline Padernal Villavende was assaulted by her employer for days and was imprisoned in her room until her death. Nabalitaan natin to, Ginoong Pangulo. Si Villavende asked for help sa kanyang recruitment agency. She asked for help. Pero wala hong tumugon sa kanyang paghingi ng tulong. Binulabog po tayo noong nabalitaan na lamang natin siya isang malamig ng bangkay. Yun na yung huling balita natin. Patay na lang ho siya. Again, Mr. President, ito pong mga bagay na ito, lahat po ng instances na ito, dininig natin dito sa Senado. And that made us, prompted us in the committee to come up with solutions, including that bilateral agreements that we need to make sure is being respected by the host country. Mr. President, how many more Filipinas have to suffer before we put a stop to this abuse? We're calling for the government and the Department of Migrant Workers to look into the possibility of a deployment ban until we can be assured of the safety of our migrant workers. And that would be my first question, Mr. President. Ang ating colleague, dear colleague, Senator Jinggoy Estrada, has also been the chairperson of the Committee on Labor for quite some time. That's why it's a big shoes to fill in, distinguished colleague, when I took over your post. But, I wanted to ask, Mr. President, because in the Migrant Workers Act, yung pong RA 8042, dun sa Section 4 na inamyendahan ng RA 10022, it requires that Filipinos may only be deployed to countries, one, that have existing labor and social laws protecting the rights of workers, including migrant workers. Two, or are signatories to and or ratifiers of multilateral conventions, declarations, or resolutions relating to the protection of workers, including migrant workers. And last but not the least, that have concluded bilateral or arrangements with the government on the protection of the rights of OFW. So yung unang tanong ko, Ginoong Pangulo, sa experience ng ating distinguished colleague, ito ba ay nangangailangan or ito po ba ay kailangan tignan ulit natin, pag-aralan muli kung kinakailangang ibalik yung tinatawag na deployment ban na Ginoong Pangulo?
Sa aking palagay, Ginoong Pangulo, ay kinakailangan ibalik yung deployment ban dito sa bansang Kuwait, sapagkat sa lahat mga nabanggit niyong mga pumanaw ng ating mga kababayan, hindi lamang po si Villavende, hindi lamang po si Demafilis, kundi bago po sila namatay, marami pa hong naunang namatay. Katulad nitong si Lizelle Ukdong, Vanessa Caricia Esguera, Maria Fe Saliling Librada, Arlene Castillo Manzano, Divine Richie Encarnacion, Patrick Sunga, at Myra Luna Huntilla. Marami pa nitong 2018 pa lang, marami na hong ating mga OFWs ang pumanaw, at itong mga nabanggit kong pangalan, hindi ko po alam kung paano sila namatay, at hindi ko alam yung kanilang cause of death. Ito lang yung aking mga datos na nakalap mula sa Department of Migrant Workers. At isa sa aking nakita rito sa briefer ng Department of Migrant Workers ay ang bansang Kuwait ay hindi po signatory ng ILO Convention number 189, yung tinatawag na Domestic Workers Convention of 2011. Ngunit tayo po, ang Pilipinas po, ay isa sa mga signatory ng convention which was ratified on September 5, 2012.
Maraming salamat, Ginoong Pangulo, at dun sa tugon po ninyo na marapat lamang, hindi lang pag-aralan, kundi if I'm not mistaken, you are saying that we have to not just consider but implement a deployment ban as of this time.
If I may add, Mr. President.
Yes, please.
If I may add.
Yes, please.
Last February 12, 2018, there was a total ban
Yeah.
Okay, by the Department of Labor. It was contained on in an Administrative Order number 54 series of 2018 because of the death of Joanna Dimafilis. And the deployment ban was lifted several months after, on May 25, 2018, because of the agreement on employment of domestic workers with the state of Kuwait, and was signed by the then Secretary and our colleague right now, Senator Alan Peter Cayetano, on May 11, 2018. And I also have the copy of the agreement between between the government of the Philippines and the government of Kuwait. And on January 3, 2020, there was another resolution coming from the POEA Governing Board, a resolution number 1, deployment ban newly hired domestic workers or household service workers. And on January 15, a total deployment ban except for skilled workers and professional who are categorized as balik manggagawa. And again, in February 6, 2020, the deployment ban was lifted except for newly hired and returning domestic workers or household service workers. And again, on February 13, the deployment ban was lifted and resumed processing and deployment of all remaining categories of domestic workers and household service workers. Yun lamang po.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, for that very important information conveyed to us by our dear colleague, the chairperson of the Committee on Labor. And I support him. I believe in his competency to call on this, Mr. President. Let me just ask another question, considering na yung binanggit po ninyo, Ginoong Pangulo, parang flip-flopping. Ibaban, ipapasok uli. Ibaban, ililift uli. May deployment ban, ililift uli. Nung nilift po yung ban noong 2018, it is because of the Memorandum of Understanding with Kuwait that guarantees, among others, nakita ko po yung MOU na ito. Nakalagay po dito na yung mga passports ng mga kababayan natin ay hindi kinukumpiska by their employers na kabaligtaran dun sa kafala system, and that they are provided with food, housing, clothing, and to be registered with the health insurance system of Kuwait. Meron din access ang gobyerno sa kanila para malaman kung ano ang estado nila 24/7, malaman kung nasaan sila at ano ang kanilang ginagawa. Ngunit, Ginoong Pangulo, this was signed May 11, 2018. And if I'm not mistaken, ang span of this particular MOU will only until 4 years, Mr. President. So, if I'm not mistaken, nag-expire na po ito, Ginoong Pangulo. If I'm not mistaken, is that correct? At kung nag-expire po ito, hindi ba dapat kung nag-expire ito, dapat alinsunod dun sa expiration? Una, dapat meron bago or ma-renew man lang ito para masigurong protektado ang ating mga kababayan. Pangalawa, hindi pa ito na-expire, dapat ginagawa na ng ating mga representatives in the government na masiguro na tuloy-tuloy yung proteksyon ng ating mga kababayan. So, ang next question ko din po is that dahil po ba dito kung bakit
Nag-flip-flop.
yes, nag-flip-flop?
Well, wala po akong sagot sa inyong katanungan. Nakita ko lang po sa lahat ng mga datos na ibinigay po, isinubmit sa akin ng Department of Migrant Workers. Hindi, may isa. Sapagkat tuwing meron lang pumapanaw na ating mga kababayan, doon sila magde-deploy ng ban. Pag medyo okay na, ililift ka agad. Kaya hindi ko po malaman kung ano po ang rationale ng mga otoridad natin kung bakit flip-flopping lagi ang kanilang nagiging desisyon. At tungkol naman doon sa pinirmahan ng ating gobyerno, represented by then Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano and the government of Kuwait. Nag-expire na po ito 4 years, no? Tama po yung sinabi ninyo at nakalagay din po sa kanilang agreement, if I am not mistaken, the agreement was signed, shall remain in force and effect for a period of 4 years and shall be renewed automatically unless either party notifies in writing through the diplomatic channels of its desire to terminate or suspend this agreement 6 months prior to the ending of its validity. So
Would we know if this is still in effect? Because
I-
this automatically, unless...
I think we will still have to ask the Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I think this is a very good opportunity now to discuss policy, Mr. President, as made mention by our chairperson of the Committee on Labor. For example, Mr. President, if there are any studies on the impact of this bilateral agreements on the number of cases and general state of working conditions of our kababayan. Especially, for example, in Kuwait. Nung mangyari po ba ito, bumaba talaga. Kasi, kung ganon, dapat pagpatuloy natin ito at kung ito naman ay may pagkukulang, dapat punan natin at bilang mga mambabatas at policy makers, we are here to listen, Mr. President. Just a suggestion, especially as we tackle this particular issue, Mr. President. Because another question is that are MOU still useful or is total ban advisable? Kasi titingnan natin yung polisiya natin ngayon, yung ating present situation, in case a country is non-compliant, do you still allow the deployment of OFWs in this area? If yes, what exceptional cases would warrant the deployment of OFWs in these areas? Because I remember, Mr. President, hindi nga nasa non-compliant category noon ang Kuwait, nasa partially compliant sila, ngunit nung pumasok po tayo dito sa agreement na ito, itong MOU na binabanggit ng ating distinguished colleague, signed in May 11, 2018, na-lift po yung ban. So, again, may we know, Mr. President, the thoughts of our chairperson of the Committee on Labor as to when do we really come up with decision na ito, non-compliant, automatic. We institute deployment ban. Kung partially compliant naman, ano yung exemption? At pwede nating sabihin, okay, pwede pa rin tayong magpadala ng ating mga kababayan sapagkat safe sila at kaya pa rin natin silang protektahan.
Maraming salamat, Ginoong Pangulo. Doon po sa sinasabi niyong non-compliant host countries, kung saan ipadala natin yung ating mga OFWs, para sa akin po, dapat hindi na po tayo magpapadala ng ating mga OFWs doon sa mga non-compliant host countries. Dahil, unang-una, isusubo mo ang buhay ng ating mga OFWs kung hindi naman compliant sa ating mga labor laws yung host countries. Pangalawa, doon sa partially compliant, pag-aaralan muna natin, we have to study it thoroughly before deploying our OFWs to their respective host countries where they want to work. At ako nanggigigil ako dito sa bansang Kuwait sapagkat sa dami kong nababalitaan and it is also recorded, marami na ho talagang pang-aabuso na ginagawa itong mga amo nitong ating mga OFWs. That's why I want to recommend to the Department of Migrant Workers to ban our OFWs from working in the state of Kuwait.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me share the sentiment of our distinguished colleague na unless there is pag hindi sila compliant, dapat ban talaga. Kung partially compliant, meron ding additional safeguards to ensure the protection of our OFWs. Last question na lang po, Ginoong Pangulo, if we have some data as to what other countries or what are the countries where there is a significant number of cases of OFW exploitation and abuse. You made mention a while ago, Mr. President, na itong bansang Kuwait mukhang lagi nang nakakaisa sa atin, sa ating mga kababayan. No? May mga ilang bansa po ba na significant po yung number of cases of OFW exploitation and abuse? At ano po, what are the professions or work of the OFWs that are usually involved in these cases? I asked this question, Mr. President, because we wanted to find out if indeed there is some sort of correlation between the categorization of a country as a compliant, partially compliant, non-compliant, with the number of cases of abuses suffered by our OFWs. And if the answer is yes, then yun nga po, no, why are we still allowing our kababayans to go to these areas? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Doon po sa inyong katanungan, I will just give you a brief background dito sa aking mga datos na nakalap mula sa Department of Migrant Workers. Meron po tayong kabuuan na 1,825,000 OFWs, and 5.9% are deployed in Kuwait. Okay, in Saudi Arabia we have 24.4%, and in United Arab Emirates we have 14.4%. In Hong Kong we have 6.7%. Kuwait again 5.9%. Singapore we have 5.8%. Qatar we have 4.8%. Other countries in Asia, we have 16.3%. In Europe, we have 9.3%. In North and South America, we have 8.9%. In Australia, we have 2.2%. And in Africa, we have 1.3%. And according to the report coming from the OWA, as of October 17 of 2022, there are 6,035 cases of maltreatment and mistreatment in the Middle East. While there are only 679 cases in Asia, Europe, and the Americas combined. Yun lang po ang aking datos na nakalap. I cannot be specific in the figures. I cannot give you the specific figures right now. But if you insist on me giving you the specific figures, I will call on the the attention of the agencies concerned.
Thank you, distinguished colleague. Marami pong salamat. I would just like to state for the record as well that the last time I had this data that the gentleman from San Juan is talking about was December 2020 of January pa, Mr. President. Ang December 2020, January to December 2020, 6,035 din po yung maltreatment and mistreatment mula sa Middle East. So parang after...
Parang di nagbago?
Hindi yung nagbago, Mr. President. Kaya ko tinatanong yan para maibangga natin yung mga data natin, kung ano pa yung mga pupwede natin gawin, bakit hindi nagbago yung maltreatment at mistreatment, 6,035, contract violation, Middle East din po ito, 9,647, contract substitution, 2,550, sexual abuse, harassment, 444, rape cases, 77, lahat po ito sa Middle East. So again, Mr. President, maraming salamat sa ating kaibigan at chairperson ng Committee on Labor, Senator Jinggoy Estrada, and please rest assured that this representation will support you all the way in finding the solution, not only, Mr. President, of protecting our OFWs, but ensuring, Mr. President, that the things that we do here in the Senate ay nai-implement ng maayos. At again, nakakalungkot man isipin, parang taon-taon na lang lagi natin sinasabi, sana hindi na mangyari yung mga nangyayaring ganito. Maraming salamat, Ginoong Pangulo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to add, I'm just a bit surprised with the revelation of the majority floor leader that the data that he has right now, that was 2020, still the same as the data of 2022. 6,035 cases of maltreatment and mistreatment in the Middle East. Hindi gumalaw. Mukha yata, imposible yata yon. And we have to call the attention of the government agencies concerned. Na, bakit pareho? Hindi yata gumalaw ang numero for 2 years. Imposible naman. Pataas ang kaso ng mga inaabuso ng ating mga OFWs. Maraming namamatay. Bakit pareho pa rin ang figures? And I think that is a major concern as far as I am concerned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this juncture, move that we recognize our Senate President Pro Tempore, Senator Lauren Legarda. So move, Mr. President.
Our distinguished Senate President Pro Tempore is recognized, Senator Lauren Legarda.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ako po'y nakikiisa kay Senator Jinggoy Estrada at ang ating mga kasamahan sa pagpahayag ng galit at puot at kalungkutan sa nangyari po sa ating isang domestic helper sa Kuwait na alam natin hindi unang insidente o unang beses ng kamatayan o karahasan ang nakamit habang naghahanap ng ikabubuhay sa ibang bansa. Simple lang pong aking mga katanungan kay Senator Estrada. Alam natin na higit sa 200,000, di ba? 240,000 actually ang mga OFW sa Kuwait. Is that correct? 240,000?
I think it's less than 200, around 170.
Okay. So not 240,000. Maybe this is in another jurisdiction. Do we have a DMW officer since it's a new law? Meron ba tayo sa Kuwait na naitatag na opisina ng domestic DMW office?
Madam President, thank you, Mr. President. I am not aware if they have already put up an office in the respective embassies.
Okay. Ito pong pagkamatay at nagkaroon pala ng warning si Jullibee at malupit na sa kanya yung anak ng kanyang amo. Sino kaya ang pwede niyang tinawagan sana mula sa ating embahada ng Kuwait kung hindi pa naka-establish ang DMW office doon?
Kung meron po tayong, katulad na po na sinabi niyo, kung meron po tayong hotline number, na binanggit din po ni Senator Tulfo, pwede po siyang tumawag. dun sa hotline number na yan. Ngunit nung tinawagan po ni Senator Tulfo yung hotline number kanina, mukha yatang wala sumasagot. Pero dito, meron akong nakalap na pwedeng tumawag sa ating embahada dun sa Kuwait. Meron pong number na binigay. Ang number nito ay purely for the assistance to nationals concerns.
ATN, okay. So meron pong
number
sa
Yes.
embahada ng Kuwait na maaring tinawagan, pero baka hindi syempre alam ng ating mga domestic workers doon or overseas Filipinos, lalo na sa Kuwait, baka hindi napapalagan
Yes, dapat yun.
ang impormasyon na yon.
Ang suggestion ko po dyan, Ginoong Pangulo, ay bago po sana umalis ang ating mga kababayan papunta ron sa bansang Kuwait, ay siguro dapat binigyan po ng briefing or orientation at binigay po yung kaukulang mga importanteng mga telephone numbers kung sasakaling magipit sila o naman ang mangyari sa kanila, meron po silang matatawagan.
Sa kaso po ni Jullibee, ilang buwan na po siyang under the employ of the parents of the perpetrator of the crime?
Well,
Matagal na pa po siya doon o ilang buwan pa lang?
6
6 na buwan.
6 na buwan lang po.
At itong isang 17-year-old ang siyang nagbigay ng threats at siya po ay nagpahayag pa. Kanino po siya nagpahayag?
Sa kanyang kapatid po.
Sa kanyang kapatid.
Inamin niya ang karumal-dumal na pagpatay sa ating kababayan.
At dahil nangyari po yung krimen na yun, ang tingin ko po ay hindi po nila alam kung saan sila lalapit or kanino tatawag. Otherwise, they would have asked for help, right?
No, the brother, according to the report coming from the DMWD, reported it to the police.
To the local police.
Yeah, to the local police of Kuwait.
Was it back then?
When the perpetrator or the suspect admitted to his brother that he was the one who killed Jullibee.
So it was, they went to the police.
Reported to the police.
After the crime was...
After the crime.
Okay. But during the days before that there were threats to her life, that she conveyed these threats to her
family,
no action was taken by the local authorities, or whether police in Kuwait or even the Philippine embassy there, because in the absence of a DMW officer, we have the POLO officers that should address the concerns of our migrant workers.
I do not think there was an action taken by any authorities of Kuwait, since Jullibee just reported the maltreatment to her family.
And her family did not have access.
I don't think her family did not have access to authorities in Kuwait, or even our authorities here in the Philippines.
Would you agree, Mr. President, distinguished sponsor, that for at least countries where we deploy our domestic helpers, who in the past, based on our historical knowledge and statistics of the DOLE, of the BMW, of OWA, have had problems with their employers, that we must have a special arrangement for one hotline, easy access 24/7, and action, not call center type that you would have to go through OWA in the Philippines and a call center agent recorded message would answer, but to each his own. Ibig sabihin po, pag sa Kuwait, sa mga bansa na marami pong domestic helpers na dinedeploy ang Pilipinas, na meron po at least isa ng panggagahasa, pinatay, abuso, na may history ang bansang yan. Isan lang na Pilipinong inabuso, ay sana yung ating konsulado and or embahada doon ay merong special hotline and programs and activities na pwedeng tawagan, puntahan, emergency number, depending on the country. Don't you agree, Mr. President?
Maraming salamat, Ginoong Pangulo. I totally agree with you, the gentlewoman from Antique. Dapat magkaroon talaga ng hotline, hindi lamang sa Kuwait, hindi lamang sa Saudi Arabia. Kasi sa Saudi Arabia, napakalaking bansa niyan. Meron tayong mga OFWs sa Riyadh, kailangan magka-hotline sa Riyadh. Meron tayong mga OFWs sa Jeddah, kailangan din magkaroon ng hotline sa Jeddah. Meron din tayong mga OFWs sa Bahrain, kailangan din magkaroon ng isang hotline dun sa mga nasabi kong mga key cities ng Saudi Arabia. Ganon din, katulad din ng iba't ibang bansa. Kung saan marami tayong mga OFWs, Hong Kong, Singapore, United Arab Emirates, sa Qatar, marami ho tayo dyan mga OFWs. Kailangan talaga, ako po'y lubos na sumasang-ayon sa inyong suggestion na makapaglagay ng hotline sa bawat bansa, hindi lang bawat bansa, kundi bawat syudad ng host countries.
Thank you for agreeing. At kayo ba ho ay sumasang-ayon na yung OWA hotline, kanina na ang sumasagot ay recorded message, ay hindi sapat, and to be able to address this concern na paulit-ulit na ilang taon at dekada na may mga pinapatay, ginagahasa, inaabuso ng mga Pilipino, mostly domestic helpers, sa iba't ibang bansa, sa Middle East usually, pero hindi lang sa Middle East minsan, sa ibang mga lugar, ay depende sa need at depende sa kultura at depende sa frequency ng mga nabiktima doon. Meron naman historical knowledge at statistika ang mga ahensya natin at ang mga embahada ay gumawa sila ng programa na gaya ng binanggit ni Senator Raffy Tulfo ay merong hindi lamang hotline o pag tumawag at may sumagot na taga-embahada, ang gagawin niya? Dapat may program of action for immediate action, and that hotline must be accessible, not a call center but a warm body who knows what to do at that immediate time. Because if there is such a thing, Mr. President, nung pinahayag na ni Jullibee ang kanyang pagkakamaltrato sa pamilya ng kanyang employer, ay sana napuntahan na niya o naabisuhan siya ng kanyang kapatid at nakup-kup na po siya sa isang shelter or mismong sa ating embahada. Di ba po, kung handa ang ating embahada sa kaganitong kaganapan at walang dahilan na sila'y hindi handa, dahil alam naman natin hindi po to ang kauna-unahang beses na merong inabuso, pinatay o ginahasa at ganitong nangyari sa bansang Kuwait. Di ba po? Dapat handa at alam ng ating konsulado, ambahador at mga domestic at polo offices doon, at wag isisisi na hindi nila trabaho ito dahil nagkaset up pa lang ang DMW na bagong institusyon. Is that correct?
Yes, you're totally
President?
correct, and I totally agree with all what you said. And I still have one suggestion. I want to talk to all labor attachés stationed in abroad, especially those in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, in Qatar, in all Middle East countries, para malaman natin kung ano ang pwede nilang gawin.
Yes.
Makaagarang aksyon. Kung meron katulad yan nangyari kay Jullibee, katulad nangyari kay Villavendi, kay Dimafiles, kung ano talaga ang pwede nilang gawin agad-agad. Anong solusyon ang pwede nilang gawin agad-agad. Kaya gusto ko pong makausap ang lahat ng mga labor attachés. Kung meron pang labor attachés ngayon, I don't know kung na-abolish na yung...
There are still. Meron pa po. Dahil
there are still
yes.
Labor attachés stationed in the host countries in the Middle East. I really would want to hold a dialogue and to explain to us kung ano po talaga ang magagawa nila just to save the lives of our OFWs.
I would join you in a resolution and a hearing, because all these speeches and giving burial assistance and kabuhayan assistance to the deceased family, while these are laudable moves showing our sympathy, will not stop the abuse on our overseas Filipinos if our manner of solving it will be response-oriented. So I would seek the guidance of the chair of the committee and your honor as well, so that consultation with the labor officials as well as those that have migrant workers officials already in this country would be able to tell us. But actually, simple lang po eh. Magkaroon nga, sinabi po ni Senator Tulfo, kung nalaman niya, kaya niyang aksyonan. Kung kaya yan ng isang senador, kaya naman siguro with all the millions of resources that we give our government agencies, that every jurisdiction where there are Filipinos who serve as domestic helpers, who are sometimes prone to be victims of psychologically ill employers, would have a place, a number to call, a place to run to at any one time they fear for their lives. Simple lang po yan. I don't think it would take millions of augmentation in the budget. Trabaho po nila yan na alamin at trabaho nila para bigyan ng maraming assistance ang ating mga Pilipino naghihirap doon na maaring hindi alam ang kanilang pinapasok dahil na lang sa kahirapan sa ating bansa. Mr. President, ILO 189 was ratified during my time, I believe, as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. And this ILO Convention 189 is the International Labor Convention on Decent Work for Domestic Helpers. Of course, I'm proud that I was able to sponsor it, but all this ink on paper, going through the process of ratification of conventions, if it's not implemented and operationalized and our kababayans are still being raped and killed and abused, then what are we ratifying conventions? In fact, which brings me to my next question. Is Kuwait a signatory to ILO 189, and do they have the implementing legislation in their country so that their people can be educated on how to treat decent human beings?
Kuwait is not a signatory of the ILO Convention.
Okay. Now, is it not worth looking into that we deploy our workers in countries that have ratified such conventions to show their appreciation and recognition of the rights and, as it says, decent work for domestic helpers? So Kuwait is not
A signatory.
party to this agreement.
Yes.
Yes.
That's why I suggest to our government agencies concerned, like the OWA, not to deploy OFWs to countries who are not signatories of the ILO Convention.
I agree. In fact, Mr. President, 189, we already concurred in. There is ILO Convention 190 for ratification. And this is the Convention on Violence and Harassment in the Workforce. So aside from 189, which some of us were already here. I was chairman of Foreign Relations, I think 2015, when I sponsored that. We unanimously concurred in the ratification of 189. That is for decent work. Now, for 190, that is for protecting our kababayans against any form of harassment in the workplace and violence. I don't think the Philippines has completed the process of ratification. So my question is, are we at all a signatory? And if we are not, we should be a signatory. And if we have not ratified it, where is it? In the DFA, in the Office of the President, transmitted to the Senate, or is it in the Senate already in the archives and not yet heard? We must know, because this convention is important. First, 189, decent work. Now, protection against violence and harassment in the workforce. We must ratify this immediately, if not yet ratified. Maybe I am not informed that we have ratified it, but I do not remember having concurred in 190.
Kailan ba nangyari? Well, I am not aware if we have already ratified the ILO Convention number 190. Mr. President, our Deputy Minority Leader maybe has something to
Start
share
a
with us.
recess recognized.
Salamat kaayo, Mr. President, with the indulgence of the good gentleman from San Juan and the gentle lady from Antique. Thank you so much, Mr. President, for the gentlewoman's very passionate questioning and the good gentleman's interested response about ILO Convention 190. In fact, Mr. President, ILO Convention 190 is up for ratification by our Senate. And I hope that our labor movement partners who are advocating, who are campaigning to us here in the Senate for its ratification, I think we have clear signals of the support and the interest, the openness of at least two of our colleagues already. And may I add my voice to this, Mr. President, that I am hopeful with the positive action of the Senate previously on ILO Convention 151, also as the good gentlewoman from Antique mentioned earlier, ILO Convention 189, na maasahan po na ating mga kababayan manggagawa ang agaran din at positibong aksyon ng Senado sa pagratipika ng ILO Convention 190. Daghang salamat, Mr. President. Good
thank
As
you.
for the information of the two ladies, senators,
Yes.
according to our secretariat, they have not transmitted to us yet the
So wala pa.
ILO.
It's not here.
It has not been transmitted. Similar to what happened to the RCEP, I was asking the sponsor to sponsor the convention or the treaty, but it was only recently submitted to the Senate. With this case, with ILO 190, wala pa.
I sadly stand corrected then, Mr. President, but hope that the relevant government bodies will take the necessary step para madagdagan po ng Senado ang historically positive actions natin sa ganitong mga importanteng komisyon. Salamat kayo sa liwat, Mr. President.
I appreciate the Senate President's intervention and given the clarification. I appreciate as well the information given by the Deputy Minority Leader. I am one with you, with a good sponsor in supporting the ratification, the concurrence in the ratification of ILO 190, having, as I said, sponsored the convention before that in 2015, which is the 189 for decent work. This is 190 is against harassment and violence in the workplace. But again, all these conventions and ratifications, and treaties, etc. will be to naught. Baliwala po ang ating mga salita at pagpirma kung hindi po natin binibigyan ng ngipin ang mga batas at ang mga konbensyon na ito. Kaya ang simple pong hinihiling po natin sa DFA, sa DOLE, sa DMW, sa mga polo ay magtatag ng hotline, hindi bukas, ngayon, na simple po kung wala silang polo at walang DMW, maski sa konsul, maski sinong tao sa embahada na maaring tawagan ng distressed OFWs. I will repeat, hindi siguro po minurder si Jullibee kung pinahayag po niya sa kanyang kamag-anak ang mga maltrato sa kanya, kung meron po silang alam na numerong tatawagan at nasagip po si Jullibee ng maaga. So, marami po sanang buhay na masasagip kung maayos po ang ating pamahalaan. Hindi lamang ngayon, sa mga nakaraang taon at nakaraang dekada na paulit-ulit ng ganito, kabaong umuuwi. Tapos, it's just exasperating and sometimes frustrating what our embassies, consulates, polo, DMW, with different names of our institutions working overseas. But if you could not save the life of one woman and many others before her, then we are remiss in our duties.
Yes, ladies senator from Panay, Senator Ontiveros recognized.
Salamat kayo, Mr. President. Once more, with the indulgence of the good gentleman from San Juan and the gentle lady from Antique, para lang kumpletuhin yung impormasyon kaugnay ng ILO Convention 190, gaya ng tamang ikinorek ng presiding officer kanina, kasalukuyan nasa kamay pa po ng DFA at ng DOLE para i-transmit na po sana hanggat maaga dito sa Senado. At kaugnay po niyan, Mr. President, sumulat na po itong representasyon ng sulat sa ating colleague at kabarong senador na chair ng Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, si Sen Aimee, na kung maaari kapag na-transmit na ito ng dalawang kagawaran ay sana maaga pong maaksyonan ito at ng positibo ng ating kapulungan. Salamat kayo sa liwat, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes, I'd like to also advise the Secretariat, to our Senate Secretary, to inform the PLLO that they should double time their work, particularly on the treaties that we need to pass for this year, this next year, particularly the ILO 190. I think that's the reason why we need, after this speech, Your Honors, this has to be referred to the proper committee so that you can investigate further and ask the government agencies why are they delayed in the transmittal, for example, on the ratification of this treaty, and what have they done in order to prevent such actions from taking place to this lady, unfortunate incident, no, si Miss Jullibee?
Yes.
Jullibee Narana.
Mr. President, I'm glad that you mentioned it, and I'm grateful to you for instructing the Secretariat to follow up with the government agencies. You're being proactive, and I truly commend you for that. Mr. President, this may not be the same subject matter as 190, but it's similar because it's a UNESCO agreement that was signed in 2005, believe it or not. It's still not in the Senate, and the agencies of government are still studying it. And this is the UNESCO heritage that will provide incentives, the conservation of heritage, investments in the creative industries, in film, etc. And the French ambassador had mentioned it to us.
Yes.
It's still being studied. 2005 pa po, 2020 na. So we ask, there should be a PLLO knowledgeable staff sitting there every day, so that it is not just our secretariat, but the legislative office must be embedded in the Senate, whether online or here, so that they know what we're discussing, so that they can follow up with government agencies, and there should be no missing link or time lost, because every minute is urgent, especially when it comes to the concurrence and ratification of important conventions and treaties, Mr. President.
I absolutely agree with the lady senator from Antique and the Republic of the Philippines, and it shall be ordered. That
Thank
will
you.
ask the PLLO to report to us immediately.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is our earnest request that the PLLO must know all the hearings being conducted, all the resolutions being heard, and everything being taken up in plenary, so that at any time they can call the government agency that is lagging behind in their knowledge or importance of their concurrence in those measures. We understand the difficult work of the executive, but it's also important that institutions of government speak to each other so that we can serve our people better. I thank the Senate President for being proactive in this regard and many more things. And I'm grateful to Senator Estrada for bringing this to the floor today. Nakakalungkot, nakakasakit sa ating lahat. At ako yung nagagalak po na marami tayong kakampi, tayong lahat, na pagbibigay ng tulong kung paano bigyan ng solusyon. Hindi lamang ang pamilya ni Jullibee, kung marami pang kamukha nila na hindi alam saan tatawag, saan pupunta para bigyan ng solusyon ang kanilang mga lulungkot na buhay. Thank you very much, Senator Estrada, for patiently answering my queries. Thank you to...
So hanggang dito lang tayo mga tol. Maraming salamat sa panunood at patuloy na suporta. God bless you sa inyo lahat. Hanggang sa muli. Paalam.